Utah is one of the betting favorites in the Big 12. How are they handling that going into spring football? Let's talk about that with JT Wistrcill, host of Locked On Utes, joining me here on the show. What is priority number one for Kyle Whittingham in year 76 in Salt Lake City?
It's definitely what it's beginning to feel like. Honestly, I think it's sort out the offensive line. I just trust the coaches so much in the secondary and to a lesser extent the offensive line too. Like even though you lost Cole Bishop and Sione Vaki, like you just have such a proven track record of defensive backs coming in and still producing at a high level and then transitioning and then doing it at the NFL level. Just saw Jalen Johnson get paid this offseason, for example. Cole Bishop's going to be a high draft pick too. So the Utah secondary train continues to roll on. But the offensive line was a little underwhelming last year. So I think that's the most important unit to get figured out. They have a 4-star from their 2023 class who's currently starting at left tackle right now. Didn't play last year. They had one of their other left tackles from a season ago who's a true freshman. He's now on the right side. So some guys who have gotten 1 or 2 years of experience there, but still some things to figure out along the offensive line. I like the players they have in place in there, but of all the units for Utah right now, it's probably the one I feel like, okay, I have the least confidence in. And so many other players are returning, right, for this team. So like Cam Rising, all these other ones, easy to be confident there. But I think the biggest one is getting the offensive line right, because look, Cam Rising has obviously battled injuries. So you need to keep him upright and healthy. And how you do that is with a strong offensive line that can not just protect Cam, but run the ball and take the pressure off him. Jim Harding's done a good job with the offensive line. I expect that group to be ready to go by the time the season comes, but still some things to sort out there because there's a couple guys who are going to be starting there that aren't proven or maybe aren't coming off the best seasons.
The Utah Utes and the Kansas State Wildcats are, according to FanDuel, the two betting favorites to win the Big 12. Now, those would have been my selections, and they were here on the show before those odds came out as, I think these are the top two teams going into next year. I give the edge to Utah because I've got, a couple of veteran coaches in Chris Kleiman and Kyle Whittingham with the Utes, but I've got a more veteran quarterback in Cam Rising compared to Avery Johnson, who's got a lot of potential but isn't quite as proven yet. So I don't have a doubt. I have a question about, what he's going to be able to accomplish as the full-time starter with Will Howard now over at Ohio State. Do you feel right now like Utah is worthy? Is the sense around that program, Big 12 favorites here, got to appear in the Big 12 title game, college football playoff or bust? Is that the vibe around Utah football?
I would say, I feel that way. Kyle Whittingham will never let his team feel that way, right? He's going to look for the one person who says, look here, they say that we can't do it in our first year. Every coach, and especially one like Kyle Whittingham, who's old school, how can I make my team the underdog? How can I make us doubted any way he can? So Utah is doing everything in their power to talk themselves and not being the favorites. But myself, you already said you do too, and I think a lot of people are going to have Utah as one of the favorites in the Big 12, if not the favorite, because Cam Rising's coming back. He's one of the top returning quarterbacks in college football. Yes, I know he didn't play last year, but I do expect with this much time in recovery, I just like his odds to get back to that form more than I like a lot of these other quarterbacks who are maybe changing teams or just trying to do it on a higher stage. Can they do that? I'd rather trust in Cam in that regard. You get a Dorian Singer, which was one of this team's weakness last year, right? Pass catchers. You get a wide receiver who had 1,000-yard season just 2 years ago at USC, just too many mouths to feed there. So there's some okay receivers. I like the room of running backs Utah has. And I know I was talking, there's some questions along the offensive line. This is still a pretty solid group. Obviously, we wouldn't be talking about Utah as one of the favorites in the Big 12 if they had an insane amount of questions on the offensive line. There's just about 2 or 3 key pieces. But the big thing for Utah is obviously going to be the defense. This is a top 5 run defense in college football last year, and they lost their top pass rusher in Jonah Ellis. But everyone else is back. Literally all the D tackles, defensive ends, linebackers. It's a great unit led by the likes of Lander Barton, Karene Reed, Junior Tafuna's another guy up there, Connor O'Toole, a potential breakout player to watch. So the front seven's a game changer. And I already talked about how the secondary churns out NFL guys like crazy. Pair that with fantastic coaching, and I believe you have the makings of not just a Big 12 contender, but a college football playoff contender for sure.
The Big 12 has not historically been known for defense the way that Utah has. And, the Utes have played in their fair share of blowouts. I think of the game in 2022 against USC, 43-42 at Rice-Eccles in what was just a fantastic college football game. How do you see that contrasting style playing out between a lot of offense, not a lot of defense, to Utah who wants to slow it down, run the football a bit, and can sometimes score a lot of points when needed?
This was an offense that when Cam Rising was running it, scored well over 30 a game back in 2022. So I do expect Utah to be able to keep pace with some of the higher scoring Big 12 teams. And honestly, in some of those matchups, I feel like Utah should be able to win, because while I expect Utah to score over 35, I feel like there's a lot of games that Utah is going to be able to hold teams under 30 because of how potent that defense is. Teams aren't going to be able to run the ball, as we highlighted. So you're going to become one dimensional too. And Utah has some guys like a Zambaya Vaughn, who's a really experienced corner, as well as a lot of those other guys that I expect themselves to just assimilate themselves into that secondary very quickly. And this is going to be a balanced offense. I mean, Cam Rising is a special player for a reason. There is no other quarterback in college football right now, especially in the Power 4 rankings, that has led their team to back-to-back conference championships. Yes, I understand Cam Rising didn't do that in 2023, but he did it in 21 and 22, and he's coming back to lead this offense. You got Brant Keithy, who's one of the top tight ends in college football. Already mentioned some of the other receivers, as well as a stout running game. I really feel like this Utah team is in a strong position to be the class of the Big 12. It's one of the most well-balanced teams and rosters, and for those of you who think I'm absolutely crazy, I would just encourage all of you to look back and see what this Utah team has done under Cam Rising and why they have continued to be, and even under Kyle Whittingham, right? Like, they've just year in and year out been a top 15 program in college football. Don't expect that to change next year, as they were really that for a lot of the year without Cam Rising. What are they going to do with Cam Rising? I think some really special things come this fall.
You know, a unique situation exists with the Utes football program. Cam Rising takes a year off and comes back for his 7th year of college football. Yes, it is year 7. That's not me being hyperbolic to crack a joke or whatever. But he is returning to a coaching staff that has the same head coach, the same offensive coordinator, and, though it doesn't necessarily affect him as much, the same defensive coordinator across the board. That is a rarity in college sports nowadays. And I have been very high on teams across the country, whether you're looking at, an Ole Miss or a Missouri or a Georgia in the SEC, anywhere you look, if you've got the same coach and quarterback, and especially coordinator as well as you had the prior year, I tend to like that level of continuity because they're the most important positions. So how does that shake out after taking a year off and Rising was wearing a hoodie on the sidelines, had a headset on last year? Do you think it's a seamless transition for him to just jump right back into the fold, and we should expect, assuming full health, which he should be able to get to, should we just expect to see the same player that was last on the college football field in 2022?
I think there's a really good chance we see the same player, and if not the same player, something very close to it. He's looked really good in spring ball. It's been fun to watch him out there and go and sling it a little bit, and we've gotten to see a little bit of him in a scrimmage. We'll have the spring game coming up where I expect to see him get maybe a drive or two, as normal is the case before the starters usually take a seat after that. But I do expect Cam to look pretty much like himself. Now, yes, maybe he'll start slow. Maybe there's a little bit of rust there, but I think he's going to shake it off. Utah's non-conference schedule is a joke as well. Like, it's super easy. Utah State, they play Utah State, but also Southern Utah is the one they start their season with. Baylor in Rice-Eccles Stadium. That's going to be another one that is.
Go T-Birds, baby.
Yeah, hey, you never know, right? Maybe you can, if you're hoping Cam Rising's really rusty in that one, I know, for your sake, when you're on the call for that one. But it's going to be really interesting to see how long it does take Cam. I don't expect him to, the very first game, look like one of the 10 best quarterbacks in college football. But when it matters most in November, I definitely think he's going to look like such. This is a guy who's a proven winner. Cam Rising, I would love to know how many times he's been featured in like SportsCenter's top 10. I bet it's very few and far between. But if there's one thing I know about Cam Rising, he's won. That's why I said one of the only quarterbacks, if not the only quarterback, who's won back-to-back conference championships, has made big plays, led a game-winning drive against the likes of Caleb Williams, and has 2 conference championships and Rose Bowl appearances under his resume because of his clutch plays. And I think he's going to be making a lot more of them come this 2024 season.
JT Wistrcill, Locked On Utes. Thanks so much for coming by. Enjoyed it as always, my man.
Thanks, Spencer.